I am going further and further into my understanding and study of what the future holds for all of us, I'm thrilled to have with us Atul Kasbekar, who is an Indian fashion photographer of high repute. Everyone here knows him and his work. He's been in the sector for many, many years. He's also started and successfully ran Bling Entertainment Solutions for a very long time, which is an event and celebrity management organization, and is today a Bollywood film producer at Ellipsis Entertainment. He works very closely with a very dear friend of mine, Tanush Garg, and they have managed to produce some fabulous films in the past, like Tumhari Sulu, Nirja, etc. He's also served as honorary chairman of the Photographers Guild of India, graduated from the Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara in the US after dropping out of a chemical engineering program, which I'm going to pick his brains on as to why he dropped out of his chemical engineering degree. But Atul Kasbekar is here with us to talk a little bit about photography, a little bit about celebrity management, and most definitely about film production. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for doing this for us.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
Terrific. Okay, so as we get started and sort of warm up and sort of set the context and stage for this conversation, why as a film producer, why in, from your vantage point, is it necessary to even have this conversation? Why think about the future, and how does it matter from your lens?
Look, I mean, when I first came down, just in terms of context, as a photographer, there were people who were sometimes shooting 2 assignments a day, and I discovered that within like the better part of a decade, all of a sudden their phones weren't ringing as much as like they used to. So when I started in India, I was about 25, and in my early 30s, I could see this happening, to the generation ahead of me, and the generation ahead of that was almost invisible. Okay, so in India, at least, it would seem that something like photography is a young man's profession or a younger man's profession in India. In the US, I find a lot of people in their 60s, still shooting some seriously big work. So I've always, in any case, kept an eye on the future, and it made sense to say that, to have some humility in your head to say that, look, if it can happen to them, and they were rock stars in that time, it can perfectly well happen to you. So you then get used to a certain amount of income coming in, a certain lifestyle that you have, and you don't want that to change. So I've always kept an eye out in terms of what it is that I need to do to, secure myself, my family, and not have to, then be effectively in trouble financially from that front. So hence, so when I first came back, I was used to working with people in the US who had agents. So I said, okay, let me try and get an agent. I discovered the concept didn't exist. They're like, in terms of an artist representative for a photographer.
Yeah.
And, so obviously you can't sit and develop one, but it was at the back of my head that, okay, here's a potential market that one needs to, keep in mind, because we tend to, follow trends that are happening abroad, and then, so which is when my foray into, for example, talent management, came in.
Okay.
The other choice was to try and be a director, perhaps, but I realized very quickly that people whose work I admired had paid their dues in making ad films or motion picture, and they were obsessive about that, just like I was obsessive with photography.
Sure.
So if I had to do that well, while my curve would be a lot shorter because you're already, to some level technically, up to speed, I would still need to spend the 1-2 years, maybe to some extent going back to school or assisting somebody, to have the necessary skills to like get into something like ad films or, or motion picture.
This is, I think, my 40th interview, and I think this is the most candid and pragmatic response I've gotten so far, that you need to keep your eye on the future, just because, you're used to a certain lifestyle, you got to let the money come in. And if you don't keep an eye on what's happening in the future in terms of work, you're just going to be left, become oblivious or redundant in the large scheme of things. So thank you for being so straightforward with that answer. It was beautifully framed. I've heard a lot of stuff.
The odd thing is, let's say if you have to, God forbid, get a bypass done,
sure,
are you to go to a cardiologist, cardiac surgeon, whatever, who has done 20 surgeries, or are you going to go to somebody who's done 2,000?
Yeah,
right?
sure.
So in a lot of professions, which you find that the experience counts for a hell of a lot. So let's say in the lawyers, there are lawyers who are working actively into their 70s. And what's clear as day is that it would be, a hailstorm in May in Mumbai before that happened. So however cool you think you are, the reality check is that you might last a little longer, but you're not going to be your lawyer friend who is now an absolute rock star and is in his 60s. As a photographer, whatever. So just reality checks.
Okay, super, great. Okay, awesome. A lovely context to the conversation. Thank you for setting that. So now that we've established this sort of context, what are some of the factors that you're seeing influencing your industry? When you want to talk about industry, talk about photography, or you talk about the film production space. What is going on? What some people have talked about DEI, sustainability, AI, technology. What's going on in your space? And if you could share some examples or case studies on what's really going on.
In photography,
or if you want to filmmaking, whatever you prefer.
Well, look, I mean, obviously there's the advent of like a bunch of technology that's now coming in that is setting a challenge, so to speak. Now, here's the deal: is that there was a time, and that is just slightly before my time, when you shot on film and then you made a dupe, and on the dupe people would then physically paint in retouching.
Sure.
Which is a painful, long process. Now it's advanced to another level. You can't imagine someone. So it just made the artist who was with his or her eyes and hands, going and correcting lines and stuff like that. Suddenly you didn't have a job. So my personal theory on any of this is that, look, as the saying goes, no typewriter ever wrote a novel by itself.
Sure.
Okay. So in fact, each time I'm lecturing at some place and there's some enthusiastic looking kids, talking about, photography, or they'll ask, what camera should I buy? And my standard response is the line I gave you, and buy whatever camera it is that you can afford. Okay. Sure. So there's technology out there. It's not going to create an image, so to speak, by itself. It's what's between your ears that, comes into play, creating an image. And now it's more about creating an image as opposed to taking a picture and that's that. That is now like reserved only for people like photojournalists and and wildlife photographers, etc. So you have a situation where, so I keep telling people, where if you go abroad, do you go to the museums? Do you go to the art galleries? Do you just open a book on graphics and just scan through, if not read extensively? Your knowledge on just the world of art needs to be as exhaustive as it can be.
Okay.
Because what you then do using that tech or that software or whatever it is going to be unique to you, because you've had so many different life experiences, in the arts. And I was actually quite good friends with Hussain Saab, the painter, so Maqbool Fida Hussain, and he had some golden words. He said, that every artist should study the other arts and not your own necessarily, because in some subliminal way, you're going to get inputs from what you saw 5 years ago into an image you create today. So, and it's astonishing actually, because in a lot of places, when I say, who has been to see this particular show that happened last week, and you'd be lucky if like one or two hands came up in a group of 80, 100. So, and so that's really it. So I've never been really scared of technology. I think it's going to be something that you have to use to work and make your images better. And you have to keep an eye on that, because you can't be the last dealership for a horse carriage when Henry Ford has introduced the car. And then you can see that, ghode nahi rahenge, people are going to be driving.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying it's still man over machine. It's still human centric. whatever AI comes in and AI does, there's still got to be a human element to this trend.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I think, again, when people ask for advice, I tell them don't do only stills. Learn how to also shoot video, because at the end of the day, you'll be busy to whatever extent shooting video. That is really going to be a lot more of the future. And you're still effectively, shooting. It just happens to be in movement. Okay. So, so if you're only doing stills, I think you'll be in trouble.
Okay. Okay. So shoot, I mean, also you're saying also expose yourself to a vast array of arts. You're also saying study various forms of art, not just your own. And it's also seems like you're saying be very hands-on. If the technology is changing, keep pace with whatever technology is coming along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because what's happened with the advent of the smartphone getting a camera is that, to a great extent, the process of photography has become democratic.
Everyone is a photographer today.
Everyone can, everyone can take a snap. I hate that term, by the way. Take a pic. That's one level better. And on a given day, they could make a photograph. And on some odd day, your lawyer friend can create an image. The point is, your lawyer friend, or your doctor friend may not do that on a consistent basis, but he can on a given day. Okay. I have a very close friend called Rajesh Khanna from school who was in finance and now is kind of retired rich, and he travels all over the world.
Wildlife photography.
Yeah, wildlife. And he does some really remarkable work. Probably has more equipment than I do, in terms of long lenses for sure.
Yeah.
He can do this. I can't, merge companies and have the sets that he did.
Sure.
So everyone can, on a given day, do what you do. Nobody's trusting you to argue a case in a Supreme Court as a photographer, or to cut open somebody for even a tonsillitis. So you need to be aware that everybody can do what you can do. So you need to be that much better.
Yeah.
Consistently create images.
Okay. But how much of AI are you seeing? Are you seeing this happening around you? Are you seeing people actually using these applications? Are you seeing them using AI in everyday sort of work? Are you guys using it at work?
So I'm trying not to use it too much. We have an assistant who's obsessed with it. So he keeps popping up with stuff, and and we'll do some referencing if we're doing some referencing for a job using that. Having said this, there's a company, an ad agency I'm doing a lot of work with, and they're doing a huge push into AI. So we are looking at doing some kind of tie-up where it's hopefully at another level. And then the real money in photography is really in celebrity photography. So and right now, to be honest, it's pretty basic. Okay, it's not some earth-shaking lighting you're doing. It's usually cutouts holding a product, and insert whatever it is, whether it's a credit card or a soft drink or whatever. So it doesn't require any innate skill to shoot those shots. You're getting to do it because you'll probably, with your experience, someone like me and like a bunch of other colleagues of mine will manage to get one day's work done in 2 hours. Okay. And, sorry, there's some construction going on above. So can you hear some? Sorry.
Okay, so you're saying it is more of a productivity hack. Instead of me taking 12 hours to do something, I could do it in an hour or two. But you're not saying it's a technically way superior, way more advanced way of working so far.
It would be for a lot of people. I'm trying not to go down that road for as long as I can. I must have been one of the last people to switch from film to digital, by the way.
Okay.
The primary reason for that was, I found that obviously when the first bit of technology comes, it's going to, improve as you go along, and you're paying a prohibitive amount. So we were renting it at that time, and I couldn't shoot as fast as I wanted to. So, there would be a lag while the photo uploaded, and then your camera wouldn't fire until that was done. And, it was rubbish at that time. And you were paying an arm and a leg, and that just like your computer is going to be redundant in no time, Yeah. So, can I just call my assistant and tell her to try and stop this for 20 minutes? Hopefully, they'll go to another corner of the thing. Our office building is building 3 more floors.
Okay. That's all of India seems to be building 3 more floors.
Yeah, so possibly we are one level below the top floor. I can't imagine those guys must have killed themselves by now. So.
Okay, so you're saying you're trying to stay away from it. You're not an early adopter. You don't try to move on with this.
I've just been at the fringes of it, and like I said, all my younger assistants are obsessed about whatever. But see, I'm like, I also have to some extent ethical issues about how right or wrong it is. I'm sure I'll get around to figuring that out. Okay, to give you maybe not the perfect analogy, a lot of my guys will just place lights somewhere and kind of record the star. And then they'll start burning in highlights from the right or the left, as the case may be. My point is, if you knew you wanted the light to come in from the right or left, whatever, why on earth did you not light it like that in the first place?
Sure.
You spent 5 hours on an image, painting in the light, so to speak. Okay, you could have done that in the first place, unless you didn't know. They say, oh, but that photographer in the US, I saw his work and he was doing this. I said, yes, but maybe he didn't know where he wanted the light to come from. And then I get it. But if you didn't, so, sometimes there's some stupid things that people will do, like, okay, we'll fix it later.
Yeah.
You can, but if you pull that shirt down or the jacket down and the crease disappeared, isn't that a lot?
Yeah. Okay. So it's making people a little lazy. That is also the sense I'm getting from a lot of people. It's making people
100%.
Laid back, lazy.
Lazy and just dependent on, let's see what ideas come up. I like, for example, to jog my brains and make my brain work a little more than just relying on. So even if we did references, let's say for the iconic Kingfisher calendar shoot, there would be like an entire dossier of hair references, makeup references, styling references, pose references, but and we'd show that and go through the whole brief, and a lot of it was also what not to do.
Sure.
So it was easier for the crew along to understand that, okay, this is the kind of look we're looking at, etc. And so in a manner of speaking, you would say that the final image in some way was inspired by a combination of different things, but at no point has it been plagiarized, you see.
Okay. So, and it was all pre-planned.
So this is the zone in this area, start somewhere here, and then let's see where we go.
Okay.
So I like that kind of process.
Okay, but it's shifting. You're saying it's shifting. The young people on your team are not working the way you were working earlier.
No, 100% not.
100% not. Yeah. Okay. And you're seeing more and more, they're going to rely on these tools. They are relying on this sort of technology. They are relying on this larger dependence on post-production work is happening.
Yeah, I mean, like one of your questions, for example, in the sheet you sent me was to ask about, other businesses that kind of pop up.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's a photographer who has set up a phenomenal post-production studio, and I use them a lot, But as a photographer, I don't think, with due respect, he was doing as well as he is now. He just discovered a niche of, I'm going to take everyone's pictures and make them a lot better, and efficiently, and get paid a lot, whatever. And that's great for him, because what he's doing will sustain a lot longer than most people's pure photography work. So
okay. So when you're saying that, if I like this approach, it's very unique. If you're saying that the photographer's job is to be a Puritan, he's supposed to be the photographer. How do you think that skill is shifting then? How does one be just a pure play good photographer? Forget the gimmicks.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I use Photoshop extensively.
Okay.
And everybody wants to look 5 kilos lighter and 5 years younger, or sometimes 10 years younger, and so on and so forth. Okay. To be fair, even let's say my personal images that if somebody needs a picture or whatever, have gone very mildly retouched.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's fine. I have no problem with that. In my head, for whatever it's worth, I think there needs to be more of a contribution from me to like some kind of distillation of my life experiences that come into making an image, which I'm hoping is kind of unique to me. So I'm, for example, now working on a show of portraits, because I just wanted to take the full circle of, I got interested in photography because I liked faces.
Sure.
And most of the earlier pictures were with a box camera, an Agfa Isoli Click 3, which shot 120 film, and they were rubbish portraits of my, sisters and friends, sometimes my unsuspecting dog. So, so I wanted to come back to that. And I thought there was a certain purity, innocence, like maybe naivete, to some extent of what we were doing. And then one has made a perfectly good living taking pictures which to some extent have been doctored, if not to a great extent, right? So actually the show is going to be called Honest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because there will be no retouching whatsoever.
Okay.
So we'll do color corrections, and if the eyebrows are overgrown, we'll leave it just so. So I'm shooting a bunch of interesting people, essentially, the character actors from our industry. And hopefully towards the end of the year, it'll all be ready. I've shot 32. My list is 45.
Nice. Okay.
And then, take it hopefully to a couple of people who I've spoken to. And if they get turned on by it, then do a show. And I'm the brand ambassador for a couple of companies, including the watch brand Hublot. Then have a conversation with them and maybe then a book. Of course, I'm not telling you this. I haven't spoken to any of them as yet. But I just get all these things ready, because instead of going to someone and saying, I'm thinking of doing this, I'd rather go to them and say, guess what? I've done this. And take a look at this. And here's a 5-foot print. And, hopefully.
Okay. So what you're saying is very interesting. So it actually might go full circle and come back to candid, pure play, no touch-ups. And that's what the consumer might finally want after all this gimmicking and layering and all that is done. We might come back to a future which replicates the past, where people just want it plain and simple. Who knows?
I mean, I've been like my wife and I have been avid art collectors for years. Our personal collection of sculpture, installation, and paintings in different, it's probably close to 200 works, collected over the last 30 years, right? There'll be people who come and who like a work, and then I've had a director say, please tell me what you saw in this that you actually spent money.
Yeah.
Where do I start? You're perfectly within your rights not to like it. Right? So I'm saying, even when it comes to photography, you cannot make an image, any image, that everybody in the world loves.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, it could be a kind of photo, which is a mother and a child in a beautiful, a fuzzy light and whatever. And there'll be somebody who'll say, please spare me,
Yeah.
So, And on the other hand, you also, even if you try really hard, you probably couldn't make an image that everybody hates. There'll be somebody who, with a twisted mind, who will like it. So.
Okay, last question on photography, and then we'll move to film. What is your take on deep fakes? You've seen a bunch of deep fakes, I'm sure. Can you tell, firstly, are you, with your experienced eye, are you able to tell a deep fake from just a real picture? And what's your take on it? Where do you see this going? So
at one level, I think it's incredibly scary. Okay, because just a couple of days ago on one chat group, this guy sent me a message saying, listen, I want to send you something privately. May I? I said, yeah, sure. And it's a very famous actress in like a personal porn trip. So he said, what do you think? I said, there's no chance this is real. And I said, please, for God's sake, don't forward these things anymore. And certainly if you do, don't send it to me. And then I took it off my phone. But so from a point of mischief, malice, and downright crime, it's extremely scary. Because as the saying goes, the average intelligence in a mob is that of the stupidest person in the mob, right? So it's very easy for people to believe nonsense that comes on WhatsApp, and and it's often been used quite effectively. So nobody will bother to think, and they'll say, "Oh God, guess what?" So if you want to cause trouble, it's very easy. In fact, I'm sure you've seen those where words are put in somebody's mouth, and you've had former presidents talking out of crap, and you're like, wait, he couldn't have possibly said that. And of course he hasn't. You must have seen those Tom Cruise deepfakes also.
Yeah. I've seen them all.
That's hilarious too.
Mm.
But so it's super scary. And obviously, forget about ethical issues. These are criminal issues.
Sure.
Um, we had something that Rashmika Mandana in an elevator. You must have seen that as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Made ape shit about, so, and justifiably so. So yeah. But what was your other question in this?
So you're saying scary, very scary, unethical, criminal, etc. But can you tell, like, how good is this technology? Can you tell with your experience?
It's obviously getting better and better. There was one some time ago with another famous actress, and I took one look at it and I said, okay, you could see the glitches happening.
Mm.
There would be like a second, like scene out of the Matrix kind of thing where there was a glitch, and so I said, okay, this is definitely fake. But that would be a trained eye, and I'm pretty certain this particular one that came to me, you couldn't tell.
Okay, you couldn't tell, huh? Okay.
It was remarkably well done.
Okay.
It's just a question of what equipment you have and how much time you have and how much you want to spend or whatever, mostly time.
So the technology is good. It's only going to get better. Of course, the criminal ethical issues with this. So now that we touched upon this aspect about, like, the deepfakes are pretty good. Yeah, technology. I mean, at least for an untrained common person like me, I wouldn't be able to. Honestly, in most cases, I can't tell, to be honest.
Yeah.
What does that, now moving to film, what does that have in terms of implications to the film business, right? Where you can deepfake a voice, you can deepfake an image, you can deepfake a location. How does this transform the film business going forward?
But that would be very good,
It will be very good. Okay.
Yeah. For example, let's say we are working on a film that goes into historical flashbacks. And in the historical flashbacks, you want to make the actors talking about a past life experience.
Okay.
But you wouldn't look the same in your past life, no? If there was a past life, right? But at the same time, the audience, I mean, if let's say in your past life you were Chinese, if I was Chinese or African American or what have you, it would be a totally different looking human being. Now that for the audience,
it's too much to
whatever, right? So it still needs to look like the actor.
Yeah.
And whatever. And the director is very clear. We are going to use a bunch of AI in this and work on it, and it won't be that expensive. In fact, it'll probably be a lot cheaper than going into prosthetics and whatever. And it'll be
cheaper than doing all that crazy makeup that they do with all these actors.
Yeah. So then you have to fly someone down. You're doing 8-10 days. Like days of 4 or 5 hours of makeup, and then you only 5-6 hours to shoot, and etc. So you be as you are, and maybe just the skin tone is darkened or lightened or whatever the case may be, and some hair is added or whatever, which is simpler, and the rest of it can change to whatever extent you want, where you can tell that yaar wohi hai, it is the same actor, but looks hugely like different enough and yet familiar for people to understand the same actor. So now something like this, there's no problem. You're doing it officially. You're doing it to solve a creative and a financial roadblock, and so on. You want to strip in a location. You want to add, one medieval castle in the background, whatever it is. It's and that's perfectly okay. So there are specialists working on this. They're getting paid really well. So I don't see the problem in something like that. The problem is in all this nonsense that people will do. You can be sure there'll be it's already happening, where political parties will just have like cells that are then creating some rubbish videos of people and planting them there, and then it gets withdrawn somewhere, and then you never know where the origin source was and whatever it is. It becomes difficult. But I keep warning all my friends that, listen, tempting as it is, please don't forward. And please delete it, off your phone, because you can be sure that at some point there'll be some, and there should be some serious legislation about things like this, and then you should get into trouble.
Okay, all right. So for this sort of common usage and all this sort of deep fakes that people are forwarding around, that seems to be something that you're very against. But in terms of using the technology at work, locations, makeup, new look, you seem to be quite open to this.
Yeah, completely.
Okay. And you're seeing it happening. You're seeing you're using it right now. You're seeing people in your industry using it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Okay. So from what you're saying, then it changes the paradigm, right? Because a lot of the film production budgets used to be the locations. Now, if you can replicate the Hungarian Alps or the Swiss Alps or whatever sitting on your computer, the location factor has gone out. You're saying you don't need the prosthetics and makeup people anymore because you can now do this makeup visually on your digital screen. So that sounds like pretty radical, right? It's like pretty radical shifts coming in the industry.
Again, I'm saying, everybody, whether it's a makeup artist or a prosthetic person, not like they'll go out of business. For example, let's say 300, I believe, was done entirely on a soundstage. Okay, and then everything has been put in the, like, pretty much the background. I'm sure some of it, let's say if there's some fields or whatever which was easy to do, they're probably done, but the rest of it is all done. And it's a fab film, complete masala, and I loved it. So but I mean, where's the problem with that? If they can make the movie look realistic, make it a lot cheaper, have 10,000 Persian soldiers replicated, in the background, as opposed to getting 10,000 extras, feeding them on some godforsaken location, housing them, and not to mention paying for all those costumes. Absurd.
So you could do them with dubbing also. You can use voices. You don't need to have these actors come into the dubbing studio. You have their voice. You can replicate their voice. At some point, you might not need the actors because you can take now this actor's face and physique and then just have a dummy person do the movement and then sort of superimpose. So, I mean, you could literally make this movie on your computer without having to sign on any real human beings, it sounds like.
Not really. Now, for example, let's say Animal. I don't know if you saw Animal, but they've got Ranbir, who is now, I suppose, in his late 30s. I don't know exactly, but I would guess somewhere between 37 and 40. He's playing a college student. Now, a lot of that is pure AI and post-production that has made him look significantly younger, skinnier. He's having a fight with his sister, in terms of rescuing her from some bad guys, etc. And then you've got different phases in his
life going forward.
In his life. So I was quite well done. So, I mean, if you, as opposed to now, let me try and find another actor who looks like my lead actor. My lead actor is 40, but I need to make him look 16, 17. How are you going to do that? This at least gives you that leeway to then, do the entire thing. So I don't know exactly how it would have been done, but I would think there would be a stand-in of the same size that you want, and then you've probably replicated, RK's face on the movements of that body. That you've got the physical movements and the physicality correct, and then so. But that's fab. Why not?
You think it's fab, and why not? Okay, because it's pretty radical, right? You all this, the whole sector could be, these actors could become redundant. All this crazy pricing that they charge, everything could just go completely topsy turvy.
I don't think crazy pricing will stop in a hurry.
But I think it could, if it depends on how much there is an uptake in terms of the producer community, and then of course the consumers, right? Whether they fall for this stuff or they're just like, no, we just want like the regular old school. So I don't know if we're going to see a trend going back towards what we used to be versus a completely radical shift. It seems like pretty divergent in what might happen.
Look, there are people who have created avatars, okay, a completely fake human being, who now have Instagram accounts which have a few million followers, right? And this is one gorgeous girl, usually it's a girl, okay, and she's now an influencer. And she doesn't exist. Now, how are you looking at that? My logic is someone has used his or her brains to create this person, and now she's endorsing a makeup company and she's doing whatever it is you want her to do. And this guy is making money and he doesn't need to deal with tantrums, illness, mood swing, whatever it is. Your avatar is at work.
She's going to live forever. She's going to live till posterity. She's not going to die. She's going to have wrinkles. She's not going to have white hair. Nothing. She's going to look beautiful forever.
So now, now to be fair, the person has used technology, used it intelligently, created a completely non-existent human being out of his or her imagination, and seen a business opportunity that is clearly doing well. Now, why not?
Why not? Okay. So you seem to be pro this. You think it's just smart. He's smart. He uses the technology around him, and he's doing what he needs to do.
I think it's inevitable. It doesn't matter what I think or anyone else thinks. I think it's inevitable. You need to figure out some guidelines in terms of what would be ethically correct and not. I keep talking to writers who are terrified of the fact that at one level you could get a pretty decent first cut script. And I believe, I don't know the details to be fair, but the writer's strike in the US had a lot of clauses that covered usage of AI of coming up with script. But now my point is, the AI has picked up the information which was already somewhere in some in the internet, and pieced it together and used its brains to like get that done. But someone wrote the original material, right? You know what I mean? So is it not some form of copyright / plagiarism / whatever?
But how you can't, the problem is you can't trace it back. You can't go to GPT and say, tell me where did you draw this? I was drawing from billions of pieces of content. So tracing the original source code is very difficult. That's the problem.
Yeah. So I read something yesterday that already the average AI is smarter than the average human being by far. I think it was, I may get the date wrong, but I think either 2050 or 2070, something like that, but not too far away. It will be the AI will be smarter than all of humankind collectively.
Yeah. They're saying that. They're saying singularity will happen and then technology will become smarter than all of us.
Yeah.
There is yesterday I spoke with Rishi K, the RJ, and he said on radio now they have an AI RJ. And this AI RJ talks about the news, talks about the weather. It's doing this without the RJ even being in the room. There's an AI voice. Right. And that voice, now people are like falling in love with this voice. They're writing mails to this voice, calling in to speak to this voice. And this voice is an AI voice. So you're seeing this happen, It's on mainstream radio in India right now.
I should call him and ask him. Good pal of mine.
Yeah, it was great the way he explained it. Of course, though, he said that the prime time they will not give away to an AI voice, but the filler time, they're happy to just have an AI voice do all the talking.
Yeah, now look at it now, but here's the deal. At an event, you still technically need a physical presence, right? So whether it's the host at a big award show or it's somebody's wedding, there needs to be a human being there. So maybe the guys who make a living from their voice can effectively, do more of, live gigs.
Yeah.
Other hand, someone like Rishi, who has spoken 5 million words in his long and illustrious career, could actually probably use AI to bank it.
Yeah.
Okay, in some way, and then it's part of his family asset.
Yeah. Which also lives on forever.
Correct. Now, 50 years after he's dead and gone, you could get, Rishi's
voice. Get royalty from it.
Yeah. I mean, I want his voice to give the baseline of my product or service in an ad. And his grandchildren could be making money off it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, now that's fantastic.
Yeah. That's what we spoke about, actually, that voices will start getting banked, and then you will earn royalty, or 4 generations will continue to earn royalty. But that's now again, there's a combination. One is your voice, and then as you said, is the physical persona, is how many events you show up to, how much connect you have with the audience. Is 20 years later, is your voice still going to be the voice? People change, consumers change, their trends change, their preferences change. So the physical form becomes important in terms of keeping that human connection. So that's the sort of the balance, I think, between the tech and the human.
I know, but for whatever extent, for any professional, if you can do, I mean, let's say a lawyer, you're alone, you can do X amount of work. Then you set up a company and you have a bunch of partners and so on and so forth. And then you're getting residual income from work your junior partners have done.
Sure.
You could be on holiday in Spain and you're still making money.
Yeah, okay? Sure.
Now in every business through time, people have tried to do this, correct? Which as a photographer becomes very difficult unless you set up like an entire big studio, you've invested in, a whole lot of equipment and space, and you've got a bunch of junior photographers, came in. I used to work for a gentleman called Ron Slenzak, assistant in LA. And Ron had mastered this long back, where Wheel of Fortune, the show?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Okay, so when he was at Art Center, Pasadena, he took on this assignment for Wheel of Fortune, and this is fascinating. And I think it paid him $1,500, for the assignment. And 20 years later, or whatever, since when he had finished Art Center, 15 years, or whatever it was, he still had that assignment. But he almost never went himself. But it was a formula. You went there with that camera, that lens, you use Tri-X film, and at this exposure, and he used to tape your exposure down that don't change it. Then there was a Korean girl who used to come and do all the processing and do all the contact sheets, and then he would mark, they would approve, and then she came back and made prints. The printer was set at that height, and you had to expose the paper for 8 seconds or whatever it was at 5.6, and it went into making a perfect print every single time. And the photographer who did the assignment got paid 1/3.
Yeah.
Now, as an assistant, you were getting $125, $150 a day.
Yeah.
But this was associate photographer.
Sure.
Sounds cooler, and you made $500 4 times, that assistance fee. But Ron was making, about $800 odd, taking out expenses from the remaining 1,000, say $200 for film processing, etc. So he made $800 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say the season lasted for 10 months. I don't know how long, but let's assume 10 months. Yeah. Okay. So $800 over 5 days. So that's 4,000 in the week times 4. That's month. 16,000 times 10 months is 160K, which is a damn good living for most Americans. Right? And this was the chutur putur job that was there on the side.
Sure.
He just barely looked at. It was a system. It was locked in place. And then in the meanwhile, he was shooting the Prince Purple Rain cover, for a lot of money, and Oprah Winfrey for something else. I've actually been an assistant on some of these shoots. And he was doing the big stuff, but he never let go of the small stuff that paid the bills.
Okay. So you touched upon MF Hussain being somebody you knew pretty well, and then you talked about your art collection, etc. Since you touched upon that nerve, have you seen the immersive art experiences, the Van Gogh and all those things? Where they create.
I've been for I've seen the Van Gogh one. I've not seen any others.
So you know what it is, right? This whole and it's pretty remarkable. You walk into that space, the music is beautiful. They have Edith Piaf playing, and then this whole experience, and it's new age art. And I've seen this exhibit now in London, in Vegas. I was in South Korea. In South Korea, they have this beautiful digital experience, and it's great. Obviously, you don't need to then move these masterpieces around from the MoMA to whatever. And, it's a radical. It's very, very radical. It's quite beautiful to be in this space. Are you seeing this shifting? Are you seeing this art as a experience coming around as a new trend? And where do you think the old conventional museums, conventional paintings, etc., will move to? Where are you seeing a shift in balance?
All of it has a space. I mean, I still enjoy going to museums and spending half a day there, if not more, at various. But if something cool and new happens, I'm happy to go and check it out. I actually really kind of like the collaborations that are happening. Of course, it's a business thing, but it's fun for the collabs that are happening in the sneaker world, for example. So I have to show you something. Speaking of sneakers, 1 second. Get rid of this ground. Wait 1 second. Am I being wrong now? Oh, okay. Here we go.
This is your sneakers showcase?
Well, part of it anyway.
Is this a ticketed show?
No, but this is in my office.
Oh my God.
Yeah, then there's like double that at home.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. See,
I believe it's illegal in some countries to have more shoes than your wife. I think that's what my wife says. I believe anything she says. So.
This is why your shoes are in the office and not at home.
Yeah, but she doesn't know of some of them. So.
It's when you're saying collaborations in this space, what do you mean? What collaborations?
No, so you've got a bunch of like rappers, who who like Travis Scott. There's a Travis Scott collection. There's a Virgil Abloh collection, and a whole bunch of others. There's New Balance does one with JJJ Sound. I don't know how that's pronounced. I hope I got that right. But I mean, they're pretty cool. So, it's fun. And it's also, to some extent, a marketing gimmick. I believe Pharrell is now the artistic director for Louis Vuitton. So, Virgil Abloh was there before that. So, eventually, it's an art form.
Okay.
They're interpreting streetwear in a cool way and charging you an extra zero. So
okay, so you're saying there's space for all forms of art. The old school museums are not going anywhere. New experiences will come. Like you don't see this as a radical shift in how we consume art or experiences. This whole digital thing.
I think it'll be fine. I mean, eventually, if you go to where is it? If you go to, let's say, Paris, you want to go to the Louvre and see the paintings. Huh? If you go to Washington DC, you'll want to go to the Smithsonian. So
you want to go to the Louvre and see the Mona Lisa only because they haven't had an immersive Leonardo da Vinci immersive in Bombay and at my back door costing me, I don't know, 1,000 rupees. Then maybe I don't want to go. I don't know. I mean, we went when we were kids, right? So we're talking now about the sort of next generation and how are they going to be consumed. If you're going to be able to see all of Da Vinci's works in this beautiful air-conditioned setting, in your city, and as a moving exhibit goes around the world, and I don't need to fly to Paris anymore to do this and stand in those lines at the Louvre, maybe you will see a shift. Who knows?
I mean, I think even if I've seen, and I have seen a lot of Van Gogh's work, I'm happy to see the immersive exhibition because you probably read deeper into what it is that he was trying to do. And very often what happens with art is a painting that I've owned for, let's say, 20 years, I'll react to differently, 2 decades after owning it. So, I mean, to me, it's all good, honestly,
Okay.
Look, the Biennale that happens in Kochi, right? And they've done, I think now, it's been over a decade. And I think the pandemic has stopped for that year, but otherwise I think there's been 4 or 5 editions. Anyway, I missed the last one, but I went to the one before. And here's the wonderful thing, okay? Kochi is not a very big city, at least where the exhibitions are. So you get into a rickshaw and you go from one to the other, etc. So this must have been the 3rd or 4th edition that I had been to. And everybody has that map and you're saying, go here, go there. Now the rickshaw driver, tells me, he starts having a conversation with us and he says, sir, where you're going to, etc. So, that show very good. Must see. Next, he was giving us his opinion on which art show to go to. I assure you, this will not happen in any other state, and it's only happening in Kerala and in Kochi specifically because, and I started asking him this because we then just booked him for the day. I said, okay, this is fine. Guy knows. He said, no, what are you making? We'll just pay you. Wait outside, so I don't have to wait for a rickshaw. So they had these class tours that kept going. So his daughter must have been, when the first one came, she must have been like in the 4th or 5th standard because she was now in the 9th or 10th.
Sure.
And the daughter had then started taking the parents. Okay. And then he was going on his own or a family trip, etc. And he was getting just introduced to art. And it's a process. Nobody really can say that, okay, I know art, right? It's just a never-ending quest. So the guy, I thought that was fantastic. The rickshaw driver was now keen on it. He was telling us, I really like that show. And that one's a very small show, whatever. So, and that's fantastic. I think we should just have more of this, and just people just get tuned into.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation around this as well. Like in cities will now move towards having more art, more exhibits, because people spend so much time on their screens. They're going to create art as sort of social spaces, and that will create a radical shift in art and its consumption, etc. Okay, last thing about live events. Taylor Swift is making, I don't know, more than $1 billion or in terms of her net worth. Singapore government just paid her $3 million a show to be in Singapore. She's touring the world. Bombay's have all these shows, all this. lots of live events, right? Live event space is suddenly booming. There was a point Book My Show was going to shut down during COVID because there was no live events. And now you see this massive spike. Where do you see this? Where do you see this settling in the next 5 or 10 years? Do you see live events as still sort of forefront, or do you see us consuming content on our AR, VR glasses? Because that's going to be another big, humongous shift where I could see Taylor Swift on my screen projected at my comfort.
Sure, and you could do that, but there's nothing like seeing Chris Martin in front of you or Bono in front of you. At naming two shows that I went to recently, and there's something about a live event. That's something about live event. Every year for the last 20 odd years, I fly to London to watch an Arsenal football game. And mercifully, last couple of years we're doing well, so that's nice. But there's something about being in a stadium.
Okay.
I don't think that's anywhere. If you didn't get, I've watched obviously 1,000 more matches on the telly. But if I could make a living being a vlogger or whatever it is, just attending football matches around the world, I'd take that in a heartbeat.
Okay. So in these stadiums are here to stay, live events are here to stay. You don't see that that trend moving. Okay, let's go to the last section of the conversation around skilling and for the future. If you were to advise somebody young in terms of skill set, just now that you know everything you know about the past and you have a sort of pulse on the future, what would you suggest? What should they be? How should they be skilling?
Can you give me a 2-minute break? You want to pause? Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Last section on sort of skilling. How do you think people should be skilling as they think about careers in your space, in photography, film, media at large?
So first things first, I think what's happening is that the attention span of people has come down ludicrously for assorted reasons. That's a different conversation. So I find there's a certain pattern that I see at the early part of my career. The people who came to assist, okay, those who stayed on for 3 years and then went out on their own, became perfectly competent photographers and did very well for themselves. Those who ran away in 6 months, 1 year, etc., frankly, some of them I don't even know what they are. What they're doing anymore. I don't even know if they're in photography anymore. Okay. So I think there's a certain amount of paying your dues that is super important. And I would urge people to understand that in a field of there's just so many human beings. To put it in perspective, when I started working and the year was 1990, you could literally name all the photographers of consequence in the country. In the entire country, there would be like 10 or 12 names.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. In my zip code, there's probably 40 now.
Sure.
Okay. So, it just exponentially gone up. So, but what is it that you are doing that is so special, right? So either you be the most amazing, super specialized but phenomenal. So if you're doing hotels, no one shoots hotels like you, and you're an absolute god, and every hotel chain is breaking your doors down for you to come and shoot there. The other is that you're doing a little bit of this, little bit of that. I think it's super important for anyone starting out to please, 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 please do video.
Video. Okay.
Because if nothing else, you're shooting reels for famous people or whatever, and you'll make a perfectly acceptable living, right? Now, and it's fascinating how opportunities have arisen, and I honestly say this with a great amount of respect, is a bunch of people who were paparazzi, okay, have now, thanks to Instagram, have got these pages where there's a voyeur quality to people wanting to know what famous people are doing, you know, and they're getting paid a lot of money as a retainer from stars at all levels, popping out of the airport, and you know, this one's airport look and that, and so they've hired 30, 40, 50, 80, you know, different people who are parked at airports, parked at wherever else, you know, outside gyms and covering events and so on and so forth. Now you want that to be published on their pages, which has X number of million followers, you pay them, and it's a certain amount per month, and you know, so on and so forth. Now, and I think that's fantastic for these guys, because at one point they were behind the line saying, you know, like taking photos, and now they're making a really good living, you know, like doing this. So, and this opportunity was there for everybody. 2, 3, 4 people took it up and scaled it and just made it huge, you know. So all of a sudden they're running a full-fledged business.
Sure. So you're saying, I like the fact that you said spend time in skilling. Don't try to just run around 6 months. Build that skill set. So invest that energy, time, pay your dues, so to speak. Then you spoke about building expertise, and you like the area experts, you like the hotel people, and then the people who do only makeup, and that you like that sort of, you think that's the right way to go in the future to become a super specialist within your sector?
Okay, so Mickey Contractor, for example, dear friend of mine, famous makeup artist, okay, is hugely in demand even now, you know, for assignments as well as like weddings. Weddings is a big deal. Now, Mickey has been, I think, to hazard a guess, he would be 36, 37 years into the business. Okay. Now he's still busy because he has a really light hand, and you know, the makeup looks like it isn't there. Okay. So, but there are others who, for example, apart from this bit, have opened schools, and they have their own makeup lines, and then they're getting royalty from something else, etc., etc. For example, let's say Mickey hasn't done, you know, and that's fine. That's not his mindset. In fact, we've spoken about it. So if you see an opportunity that can make you money while you are on holiday, then that's fantastic. So I think, you know, and these opportunities present themselves. You have to figure out it's there and then do it. Or if you see someone else do it, then you see what they've done and do it better.
Sure. Okay.
You know, so but yes, video for anyone doing only stills is going to be a difficult space. I think the other space which is not developed here at all, and has the potential but will need time for people to get educated into that process, for example, is photography as an art form. So which is you know, an evolved market abroad. Okay. But here our art market is a bit naive in terms of some set things. For example, people like the idea of a canvas as opposed to a paperwork.
Yeah.
Why? Beats me. But it's just one of those things. You know, I've had a chat with my good friend Paresh Maiti, and he's saying, listen, the paper I'm using is as good, if not better, than any canvas out there in the world. Okay. It's acid-free, rag, whatever, you know, he named a brand name, I can't remember. It's horrendously expensive. And there's no problem with it lasting or not lasting. If you keep an oil painting exposed to the sun, in 1 year, those will fade as well. So, you know, taking care of it is like a separate given. You know, so so photography, for example, I suppose the first thought would be, you could make 20 prints. What's so special about mine? So things like numbered editions, and so it's like one more bizarre thing in India is sculpture, for example, doesn't fetch as much as you know, paintings do. It's changing, but it's taken a while. Earlier, you could get like a Himmat Shah for who's probably would be recognized as, or like a Radhakrishnan, would be recognized as one of our bigger sculptors. The equivalent of a Hussain or a Paresh or like a Ganesh Pine, whoever you could name, 10, 15 big artists, would be disproportionately more expensive.
Okay.
Somebody wanting to do photography and then is taking a big risk, then maybe photography as an art form, personal exhibitions, those are sold, and you make a living from that.
Okay. Okay, great. And in all this mayhem, are you seeing any careers from your space become oblivious? Are you seeing any careers? You're saying, "Hey, listen, 10 years ago, these guys aren't going to exist." And are you seeing any new career sectors emerging where you say, hey, this is something that doesn't exist today, but like you're suddenly going to have this demand for these guys?
I think whether in still or in motion picture, the post-production boom is going to be out of control.
Okay.
So I think that would be like a huge. In fact, now what's also, which has been a trend for the last few years, you have the big post-production places, VFX places that are going into something as producers. So they'll put their skin in the game of 5,000 hours of work or whatever it is, for a big magnum opus, and they are co-producers in the film. They have a take on the upside. They have IP rights or whatever it is, so
Okay.
on. And then for the production house, it saves you that chunk of change that you would have otherwise paid to get quality VFX done.
Okay, so you're seeing a shift of power there, right? Because they realize that it's the VFX eventually that also sort of makes or breaks the movie. And if they earlier they were like job workers, right? It was like give it to a job worker. It was a commoditized space.
That's well put. So now it's a formidable power center in its.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like, for example, let's say one common thing that you kept hearing, especially after a preview of most Hindi movies, is people would comment on the quality of the VFX and the background score for some strange reason. People would always think that background music, yaar, kuch jama nahi hai, whatever. So for Fighter, which I watched the preview, everybody was blown away by the VFX, and I don't recall reading anything that had any kind of unkind or disparaging comment about the VFX. I thought it was wonderfully done, and I believe that the people who did the VFX were on board as co-producers.
Okay, cool. That's a cool trend. A trend I didn't think about and something no one's mentioned. Okay, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for focusing in on everything that mattered. Thank you for being absolutely candid. And thank you for being so pragmatic. That's what I really love about this conversation. I think it's going to be very helpful for a lot of people because you literally just cut through all the layers and just presented to me the facts as they are. And I really like this interview. It's been very special. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. My wife tells me maybe you shouldn't be so honest.
I love people like you. I love people who are just direct, straight up, and sort of just avoid the fluff and just get to what really matters. So I think it's your years of training as a photographer. You're able to literally just zoom in.
Before we cut off, I'll tell you an interesting thing, which is the most backhanded compliment I ever got. But I met this girl at some party event, so on. And I usually don't forget her face, but she looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. So she said, hi, whatever, cheery face. Now I'm trying to desperately think, where have I met her, And I'm like, hey, how are you? And trying to engage in conversation. So maybe she'll reveal some nugget where I know where she's from. He said, I bet you don't remember where you met me. So I said, okay, to be honest, no. But you look familiar. So she said, I came to you for a portfolio when I was 21. I said, oh, okay. I don't usually shoot portfolios. I've shot very, very few. So she said, and you told me to my face that you didn't think you were pretty enough to be a model. Okay. I mean, she was like 5'5", and so I said, okay, it'll be limiting you, won't end up being fashion. Then is beauty work, and I don't think you should waste your money because for me, it's like taking candy from a baby. If any professional photographer shoots you, we'll make you look better than than you've ever been shot, right? But it won't work. So saying I was really pissed off. I went and shot a portfolio with somebody else. I said, oh, good. Then what happened? He's saying I got no work. Then I thought maybe that photographer wasn't good, so I shot with someone else. I got some smattering of work. I spent 5 years chasing this entire thing, and then I realized that the schmuck I met at the beginning was the only one who spoke the truth. And I said, so I just wanted to thank you for being direct. And I was shattered at that time, and you crushed my confidence because I thought I was really hot looking, but you were the only one who was right. So I like, okay, man, sorry, but whatever.
Well, that's why I'm very happy that hopefully some young people will watch this interview before they get to that stage and course correct before it's too late. So thank you so much. And I look forward to connecting with you. I look forward to meeting you with Tanuj at some point very soon.
Yeah, you could come to Bombay. We'll catch up. Sure.
100%. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good